to the Life Malcolm Show. So glad to have you here with us this evening. This first day of December, like you can really feel the cheer in the air, the chill and the cheer, but I meant to say the chill. You can really feel the chill in the air, man. Woke up this morning, it was kind of brisk. Time for the long johns to come on out. Happy to be able to kind of feel the difference in the seasons finally, right? Whole lot of hot days in November, but I'm feeling this. It's how it's supposed to be when the day ends early because of the time change and nighttime comes. You're supposed to get that nice cool winter breeze, do all the little winter like things with the folk you like doing winter like things with. So yeah, hope that you are enjoying this first day of December almost as much as I am or more. So you might have read, I hope you did, that we have a new segment we're introducing this evening. Want you to stick around and check it out, but we're gonna do some familiar things first, like invite you to call in. The number's 813-444-9588. 813-444-9588. You don't have to wait until the end of the show to call either. Like if you tuned in last week, the week before that, or the week before that, and you want to talk about something we spoke about one of those previous shows, go ahead, man. Call us up. Say what you want to say. Speak your mind. We want to hear from you. Again, the number's 813-444-9588. Share the number with your friends. Share the link with your friends. Pull people into the thing so we can all have a good discussion, a good powwow. As you know, for the past few episodes of the Life Malcolm Show, right here on In Touch News, we spoke about the nation and nation building. To a certain extent, nation building, but mainly building and understanding of the nation more than anything else, because it's important that we understand who we are. We're not going to really dig into that particular topic this evening, although I'm sure our discussion won't stray far away from the general concept that we are an African nation and we have to know as a nation of people who we are so that we know what we got to do. Kind of brings us to the first thing we want to talk about today. Oh, yeah. I mentioned the new segment, and our new segment is called They Ain't Teach Us. So we're going to do a little teaching this evening about some stuff they ain't teach us. But before we get to that, I wanted to, like I said, do some familiar stuff, which included inviting you to call in and also get into some community chatter. People been talking. People apparently enjoy a word from the word. We love our Bible, and that ain't nothing wrong with that. I heard what brother Khalid Abdul Muhammad one time say that a lot of us, referring to the Bible, Dr. Khalid was, when he talked about people always, quite often say they go by the Bible. I just go by the Bible. I go by the Bible. And Dr. Khalid said, that's your problem. You just go by the Bible. You need to go in the Bible. And so I'm sure that there are people who appreciate the fact that we do take a little time on the Life Malcolm Show to discuss the Bible and not just go by it, but go in it and see if we can ratiocinate. That's a real word, ratiocinate. The thing I like about the Life Malcolm Show is we work hard to teach here. Political education, want to help you get your vocabulary up and teach you something about health, nutrition, which is going to talk about in a minute right here, and also, perhaps ratiocinate about the Bible in our segment of Word from the Word. So apparently that's a favorite. I hope you enjoy it too. If you haven't seen it before, I hope you dig it this evening. Check it out. Call us up. Hit us on the book. Let us know on the YouTube what you think about the segments, which is your favorite, which is your least favorite. Let us know. All right. So my man Bill Holmes, been knowing Bill for a very long time. I guess this message he posted this morning makes it clear, quite clear how long Bill and I have known each other. So anyway, Bill says, 10 years ago, I made a decision to stop consuming red meat to improve my physical health and well being in my 40s. The seed was initially planted by a conversation with Carol Denise during a weekend getaway to Providence, Rhode Island, with friends in October 2010. The idea took root and germinated, I like that word, and germinated after a lunch conversation with Life Malcolm in Tampa, Florida in November 2010. Thank you, Carol and Life, for your insight and knowledge. Now, I don't know what Carol said, and I don't really remember what Bill and I talked about on that lunch meeting, although I do remember having lunch with Bill. And Bill's just a great guy. He used to come hang out at Black on Black Rhyme when I used to run Black on Black Rhyme here in Tampa. And Bill also stopped by a few of the other premier events, premier spoken word events I organized and produced in the city of Tampa over the course of, I don't know, I guess half a decade, a little more than a decade or so. And so Bill talks about this idea he had to stop eating red meat. And whatever we talked about, like I said, I don't recall the details, but I'm sure I told Bill this, that stopping red meat was had some benefits, of course. As a matter of fact, I haven't eaten land meat. I myself, this is not what I told Bill, this is what I'm telling you. Although I don't remember what I told Bill, but I'm telling you. For over 25 years, have not eaten any land meat. What I mean is if I eat any flesh, it's stuff that comes out of the water, like fish. And every now and then I used to do the shellfish stuff. But anyway, for a very long time, over a quarter century, I haven't done land meat. However, I stopped eating meat and stuff like that altogether very early on in my process of developing the diet that I have currently. So when I quit eating all meat in 1995, I started that process by stopping red meat, stopping the consumption of beef, because of the fatty deposits it would leave on the vocal cords. And at that time, I was a rapper, a vocal artist, and really sensitive and in tune to my vocal instrument. Didn't want to do anything to harm it. I thought that the Newports were bad enough. So I was like, I don't want to do anything else to mess up my voice. I stopped eating beef. So as backwards as that was, right, I should have stopped the cigarettes and the beef. But so I quit eating the beef, and that's how the process began. And I stopped right after that eating pork because, of course, that was the thing. Beef and pork supposed to be bad, bad, bad. Chicken and fish, good. So one day I'm watching television. I see a doctor come on television, and he says, and listen, pork chops was my favorite thing. Like pork chops that was fried, that was the deal. And so I saw this doctor on television exclaim that if one stops eating beef and pork but still eats chicken and fish, then one really does themselves no great good in the way of dietary nutrition, because you're still getting all of these toxins, preservatives, additives, etc., that these people who breed these animals for our consumption infuse these animals with. So I couldn't in my mind make it make sense that I stop eating these pork chops I love so much and not reap the full benefits of such a sacrifice. So what I did was cut out all meat. So I'm sure that my conversation with Bill had some instruction along those lines. It's like, stopping red meat, well, that's one thing, but if you're going to give up red meat, and you love it so much, you ought to at least make that sacrifice, that decision worthwhile by forsaking all other flesh and go plant-based. And I don't know if Bill ever quite went plant-based. However, he looks like he's doing well. It seems like he's happy about his station in life, where he is as far as eating and what have you. And like, you can't be too, right? I'm not selling anything at all except for good health. Like, take care of yourself. But the reality is, I wanted to share with you, I'm so excited that Bill on today sent this Facebook thing because it was right around this time 5 years ago. A friend of mine, many of you in Tampa knew him, a friend named James Evans, used to run the Tampa Bay Academy of Hope, and just a tremendous guy, former Buccaneer, and just a tremendous guy. And James died in his 50s, very, very young man. And it was a devastating loss, certainly sudden and unexpected. And all I could remember was how I wish James had taken better care of himself. I saw James from time to time hanging out, and I wanted to nudge him a little bit, man. Like, you don't look like that in-shape Buccaneer player you used to look like, man. Just poke at him a little bit and encourage him to do better. But I recall just prior, a few years prior to James dying, and I'm not saying in no stretch of the my imagination, James died because of some kind of health problems I could detect by looking at him. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is when I looked at him, I did not see him looking like I used to see him look when he looked his best. And I thought to myself I should have nudged him and at least said that. So that's what I'm saying. I don't know what the circumstances of that thing. But here's the point. The point is just years prior, Leroy Selman died. And Leroy Selman, I know, died from like a stroke. And it was just remarkable that this relatively young former superstar athlete died so young from a stroke. And I brought it up in our community and was right after Mr. Selman died, I brought it up and was met with serious resistance from educated and upper echelon folk in our community. People said too soon, and you can't criticize that way, and let it go, and not now. And my thing, because I wanted to put on this whole program, it was called "Don't Worry, Be Healthy," and the focus was on heart health and stroke prevention and stuff like that. Right? I'd organized physicians, people who work in healthcare services and healthcare providing and stuff like that, and artists to come to this thing, but it was met with serious resistance. And so because of that, I foolishly, right, backed off of this idea of pushing this whole idea of be healthy with the advent of Mr. Selman's death, and in the case of my friend James's death as well. However, is during this same kind of period, my man Bill Holmes is taking advantage of some advice I offered and seems to be doing quite well. So when we come back, because we're going to take a break, when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about this nutrition thing, where I fit in, what I think now about how I should approach people. And stay tuned. We're going to find out what I come up with on the Life Malcolm Show.
Touch Radio anywhere, on your phone.
I'm listening right now, man.
In your car.
I'll keep that going.
On your computer. It's a new world, baby, and we are global. In Touch Radio.
It may be hard to believe, but people just like you are already saving money. FeedThePig.org makes it easy. Their simple savings plan teaches you how to start saving without going overboard. So you don't need to start foraging wild berries.
I was skeptical, but these are actually pretty good.
You don't need to sell your soul to the devil.
$15 is the best I can do.
You just need FeedThePig.org. Don't get left behind. Get tips and tools at FeedThePig.org. Brought to you by the American Institute of CPAs and the Ad Council.
Welcome to Calvin's Barbershop.
You all gotta see this.
I don't even want to know what you're looking at on that phone.
Well, you should. I was learning about the dangers of high blood pressure and that we need to get ours checked regularly. High blood pressure can increase the risk of heart attack or stroke, but this text program can help keep it at a healthy range. Just text Barbershop to 97779 to sign up.
I'll get right on it as soon as I'm done with this baby panda video.
Text Barbershop to 97779. A message from the American Heart Association and the Ad Council.
You're listening to Tampa Bay Tammy
Your girlfriend.
on In Touch Radio.
In Touch Radio.
All right. Welcome back to the Life Malcolm Show. You are tuned in right here on In Touch News to the Life Malcolm Show. It's an interactive program if you let it be. You can call right here, 813-444-9588. Call me up, give me a holler. Right now, we're talking about nutrition and how, on the one hand, this gentleman who I did not know, but personally, seen him around town, of course, admired him on the football field here at Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and when he, did his thing at linebacker position. And so, this, icon of sorts, right, falls victim to stroke and dies relatively young. And I wanted to do something because I've for the past, well, I guess what I didn't say a bit ago when I talked about how for 25 years I've been dedicated to this diet I currently have in some form or fashion where I don't eat land meat, and I'm very particular about ingredients I ingest and imbibe. So that kind of lifestyle for the prudent comes with obtaining knowledge of nutrition and how, what stuff works on the body, what stuff works for the body, what stuff works against the human body. And so, I wanted to share this kind of knowledge with people in the hopes of preventing others of us in our community, at least from falling victim to stroke or some other deathly kind of illness, right? That's certainly preventable by nutritional means. But I, again, met with resistance, didn't push back, had not yet had the kind of experience where a loved one died and I was confronted with some kind of a public response, So I backed off. And then, boom, my friend, I see him, James, I see him, and don't nudge him about his health because at this time I'm not necessarily demoralized, but just a bit more cautious, thinking with this petty bourgeois idea, idealism instead of an African working class material mind, and saying, to hell with my personal feelings, and I don't want to feel embarrassed or shamefaced because I called somebody out on the fact that they're not looking their best, perhaps some suggestion or indication that they're not doing their best, and perhaps they're not even at their best, right? So instead of taking that on, I did this very petty bourgeois thing, and I bit my tongue and shrunk back. And however, right, at the same time I'm doing this, I've had this other conversation where it was perhaps invited and safe with my man Bill, and was able to share some ideas with him that apparently even a decade later he still appreciates. And so I say all that to say, long before this message from Bill, but quite some time ago, I've made it my personal business not to allow that petty bourgeois tendency to rise up in me again, where I refuse to express the truth, refuse to point out a contradiction or criticize one if I should see it because of some personal response or reaction one might have to my admonition or my presentation of my observation. So I say all that with the colonial virus in mind, right? There are a lot of us who are hyped up on stuff that mainstream media puts out about the colonial virus. Some of y'all call it the coronavirus, but I'm talking about the COVID-19, the colonial virus. The intelligent African working class understands that colonialism is at the root of everything. This virus, this so-called pandemic included. Colonialism makes us all sick. And so there's a lot of chatter about it, right? I don't know though how many of us really take the time to think about what other people are saying in a way that we can discuss it beyond just what other people are saying. You dig what I mean? Uh, so, I mean, like, instead of just talking about what other people are saying, really investigate, use our conversation to investigate, analyze, and question what these people are saying and why they're saying it. For example, one of the things that I've learned about the human body, I'm 45 years old. For 25 years, I've been really in tune to this body of mine and really paying a lot of attention to health, nutrition, diet, physical activity, stuff like that, right? And one thing I know for sure, I promise you, that if there's something wrong with the human body is going to let you know. There's no such thing as I'm sick, but I don't have no symptoms. I have a disease, but I had a disease, but I didn't know it until all of a sudden. That could be true, but it's not true because you didn't have symptoms. It's simply true because you did not recognize the symptoms, right? So, for example, we could use the language as an analogy. If somebody says to you, open the door in Spanish, or assuming you don't speak Spanish, let's say it differently. If somebody says to you, open the door, standing right by the door, and says to you, open the door in a language you do not understand or speak, right? You would not know what to do. You wouldn't recognize right away what kind of response you should have to this particular stimuli of words coming from this person that's giving you a clear directive. It does not mean that the words aren't there, that the instruction ain't clear, that it does not exist. No, it simply means that although the instructions are there, the signs are there, all the clues are present, you just don't recognize what those clues mean in a way that informs you how you should respond, or even that something is wrong. I have a friend, someone very close to me is a physician, and told me a story of, the physicians get together. And so this one physician friend of my physician friend told a story of a patient who came in very concerned about this bone right here on her wrist, very concerned, wanted to know what caused this lump. Why do I have this lump on my wrist? And so my physician friend advised the patient that, oh, that's normal. You're supposed to have that bone. And what had happened is that patient had lost a significant amount of weight so that now she could actually see the bone. And all of her obese friends who have not seen that bone of theirs on their own arm in quite some time made her think it was something wrong with her because she could see she lost enough interstitial fluid and subcutaneous fat that she could now see her bone. And so there are many of us who have all sorts of problems. Our body is trying to warn us about things that are going on. There's a great book called You're Not Sick, You're Thirsty, Your Body's Many Cries for Water by Dr. Feridun Batmangalich, right? And he talks about how there are many things we experience as human beings, like asthmatic symptoms, for example, that sometimes are nothing other than signs or symptoms of chronic dehydration, not the kind of acute dehydration where you might go outside and perspire quite a bit through strenuous activity and having not taken in enough water, you get the dry mouth and stuff like that. No. Not that kind of acute dehydration. However, Dr. Feridun Batmangalich suggests that there's this chronic kind of dehydration that occurs over the course of time because humans do not get half their body weight in ounces of water every day as we should. And so these symptoms like constipation, headache, sometimes high blood pressure, and others emerge, even discolored urine, if you will. All these things come about. The body presents these clues to us. However, if we don't know the clues, then we think, oh, nothing's wrong. Urine's supposed to look like orange juice. Blood pressure. We don't check it. Not only do we not know whether it's too high, right, or we don't check it to see if we don't check it at all. So we're guilty of not measuring blood pressure and things like that. So we don't pick up on that sign. That's not to say that the clue's not there. That's just to say we're not looking for it, paying attention to it, and we can go down the line. So it is with this colonial virus. It's difficult, very difficult to imagine that this deadly and dreadful thing that has killed so many people can creep around in other people without detection. And the only way you can get a clue is depending on some kind of test and some kind of person who does some stuff with the test before they bring back the answer that you're counting on. And so in my view, what makes more sense is that we pay attention to our bodies, right? Learn the signals and the signs and the rules of nutrition and biology, and in particular yours. That's one reason why it's important to know who you are, as opposed to this kind of thing where you're confused about whether you're African or not. For example, right, I remember when I went to Jesuit High School, I told you it was an all-boys, all-white school. Football, I was a football star athlete and all that. But I didn't have my African mind yet, right? And so when the white boys out there on the football field putting on, I forgot what it was called. It was some kind of sunscreen. It was a real fancy, expensive one. They putting it on. They tell me, here, you need something too. And here my melanated ass is rubbing this sunscreen on me, and I need the sun bad. African people have vitamin D deficiency because the melanin, we don't get enough sun, the amount of sun, or the amount of time in the sun that we need to get sufficient vitamin D, because we got these natural sun blockers, right? And so here I am out here doing this kind of foolish stuff, all because I didn't know who I am well enough, or at least at that time who I was well enough to know that I had, because I am African and they were not, we had different material needs that fed into our different physiological needs, and so it is with our nutrition as well. So know yourself, know your body. Don't believe that you can be sick and not know it. If you ain't sick, then you ain't sick. You know what I mean? But if you are sick, you would know it, and you should. Okay, so that's all that. We're going to take a break and switch it up, come right back with some teaching in our segment, They Ain't Teach Us, in the next half of the Life Malcolm Show. Be right back.
Ladies and gentlemen,
You know what time it is.
Grab some lunch and let's talk business with Cheryl Kuso every Wednesday at 12:30 p.m.
this is how it should be done.
Listen in on In Touch Radio.
Hello, Kubo. What have you got planned for today?
Come on, this way.
Adventure can be found anywhere, but the best place to start is in the forest.
It's the most powerful magic there is.
Head outside to discover incredible animals
Wow.
and beautiful plants that come together to create an unforgettable adventure. So grab your loved ones and explore a world of possibilities. Visit discovertheforest.org to find the closest forest or park to you. Brought to you by the Ad Council and the U.S. Forest Service.
My teacher said that we should have a plan in case of an emergency. Do we have one?
First thing I'm gonna do is grab a flashlight with dead batteries.
I'm going to start randomly throwing clothes in the bag. You two will be hiding in the closet and Dad won't be able to find you.
And that's when we both start crying.
Uncontrollably. Can you pass the cutlets?
Winging it is not an emergency plan. Make sure your kids know what to do during an emergency, who to call, where to meet, what to pack. Search Ready Kids at nyc.gov or call 311. Brought to you by the New York City Office of Emergency Management and the Ad Council.
It's a beautiful day.
This is Daryl Johnson
and Tampa Bay Tammy.
Wishing all our listeners all over the world
happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays to you.
From In Touch News
and Radio.
All right. Welcome back to the Life Malcolm Show. If you're just joining us, this is a call-in show. You're more than welcome to hit us up at 813-444-9588. You can jump right in. You don't have to wait until the end of the show. As a matter of fact, I prefer you call in as soon as you can so maybe we can dialogue a little bit about whatever it is you call to discuss. Right now, though, time for our new segment, man. I'm kind of excited about it. I want to see what you think about it. You can hit us up in the comments, too, by the way. Type in if you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, however you're watching, y'all, we got our way. So just if you can leave a comment, however you're watching, go ahead and leave a comment. We'll chop it up on that and certainly call in 813-444-9588. So I want to talk to you about They Ain't Teach Us, like what the segment is about. Again, like when we closed out, I mentioned that it's important for us to know who we are so we know what's for us and what's not. I was talking about nutrition. However, the same concept applies to education, right? We need to know what works for us and what does not. And we can only know that kind of thing when we have a good perception, not just good, but a correct perception of who we are. Because if we don't know who we are, then we won't be able to identify those who are different from us, and we'll be around here calling George Washington our forefather, just like our counterparts, our European and pre-American counterparts, and our American counterparts called George Washington their forefather. So the slave masters, their forefather and our forefather. Like Malcolm said, they'll have you while they're putting the rope around your neck, you calling for God and they calling for God. Same kind of idea. And that's only possible if you don't have a clear orientation of who we are. And so our colonizers understand that. That's why they make sure you know who, at least I should start to make sure you know who they are, but that's not necessarily true. They tell you these fables about these people, but they make sure that you know that these people existed, like George Washington. They tell you he was the first president, and I think sometimes they tell you that he had teeth that made out of wood and stuff like that. The reality is he might have been the first president. However, at the same time, he was a slave owner, and some of those teeth in his head belonged to some of those Africans whom he enslaved, right? When he lost his teeth, he took theirs. They tell you, about Jefferson, the founding father, but they don't tell you about Sally Hemings unless they attempt to make her some kind of mistress, as if one could be as if an enslaved woman can be a mistress to a slave master, right? They tell you about these people, Columbus and what have you, because they know how important it is for this national identity, this national orientation, this perception of self, how critical it is to have this perception of self, and armed with such, and what a nation can do when armed with such an identity, right? So on the flip side of that, they only teach us, and all those men that we named just now were people who were fighters and soldiers and conquerors and killers, etc. And they get high praise, right? But when it comes to the African, our colonizers have been clever at keeping those of us who should be at the forefront of our historical knowledge, of our national historical knowledge, secret from us. And in this segment, they ain't teach us, we raise them up, we bring them to the forefront. And tonight, right, and I'll tell you why we're starting with this name. Tonight, we're starting with Bras Coupe. I'm going to read a little bit so you know a bit about who Bras Coupe is, and then we'll talk a bit about Bras Coupe. So 2 centuries ago, the blood of a one-armed black man stained the swamp grass along the banks of the Bayou St. John in New Orleans. The city guardsmen who shot the fugitive slave lowered their guns. They got close enough to count 2 wounds, maybe 3, and decided Bras Coupe was finally dead. They were wrong. Born when black bodies were the property of white men and American law enforcement had barely evolved past the night watches of Europe, the slave formerly known as Squire lost an arm more than a year before the guardsmen shot him in the bayou. In January 1836, another city patrolman's bullet tore through his upper right arm after Squire resisted officers' attempt to take him back to his master. A doctor amputated the limb, and Bras Coupe, Squire renamed after the French phrase for severed arm, became one of America's first publicized cases of a police officer shooting a black man in the line of duty. Right. Here's the part I want you to pick up on, though. Pick up on this. Police waged a public relations war against Bras Coupe that turned him into an alleged super predator. By the time the officer shot him in the bayou in April 1837, Bras Coupe had become the most wanted bandit in their campaign to rid the city of the city's outer swamps of fugitive slaves. Newspapers described him as a killer and a demon so scary that white parents warned their insolent children that he would come and get them at night. The history of law enforcement in the USA is as scattered and varied as the development of each colony, state, and territory. One thread, however, is consistent. Even before police were police, the nation's earliest law enforcement agencies monitored, controlled, and punished black people in every place they encountered them. So, right, and that was a clip from USA Today, written in October 1st, 2020. It's called "The Legend of Bras Coupe: How Police Turned a Black Man into a Villain to Save Themselves." Right, and so I wanted y'all to pick up on why they ain't teach us about Bras Coupe. Number one, they ain't teach us about Bras Coupe because they don't want us to know that African people are always, intelligent African people, that is, are always in the process of resisting colonial domination, always in the process of resisting. I say I'm not a religious person. However, if I had a religion, my religion would be resistance. And African people have this long history, whether you're looking at Gabriel Prosser, Henry Highland Garnett, Nat Turner, whom many of us know, and so many others, Denmark Vesey, and so many others, Harriet Tubman, so many others. We have this long history of struggle and resisting colonial domination. And Bras Coupe fell in line right with this same history. And even after being wounded on the so-called battlefield, right? After being wounded, having his arm amputated, being shot, Bras Coupe still refused to resist, still refused to give in and continue to resist. And pick up on this. What happened in response to his persistent, Bras Coupe's persistent resistance? The patrol folk, the government, the law enforcement folk came up with their primitive version of J. Edgar Hoover's COINTELPRO. They put a slander campaign out on Bras Coupe. They made him the super predator of the early 19th century. And so what's important to learn here is that resistance, that's one, resistance always a part of African people's history in the United States, resistance against colonial domination too. The other thing to learn, to know here, the reason why they ain't teach us about brass coupe is because if they teach us about brass coupe and we can see the COINTEL program they instituted against brass coupe and then look at the COINTEL program that was exposed shortly after another brother we'll talk about in a few minutes, shortly after Fred Hampton was murdered on December 4th, 1969, when there was this break-in in the FBI's headquarters office, and they got these folders that said COINTELPRO existed, right? We could begin to say same game, different technique, and understand that whenever there's resistance, wherever there's African resistance against colonial domination in the United States, there's always a slander campaign against those Africans who resist, always a COINTEL program against those Africans who resist. And so that's why they ain't teach us about brass. They don't want us to know that we should resist, that we did resist, that we do resist against all odds. And without an arm. Last week we talked about a friend of mine who raised the question about how dangerous it might be to talk about getting guns and going up against the colonizer because they got more guns and because there's more of them, etc. Well, Brass Coupe, you know, he said, well, they got more arms, but to hell with it. I got one arm and I'm going to resist till I'm done. And so, dangerous or not. And so they ain't teach us about Brass Coupe because they don't want us to understand that kind of resistance. And they also know that they'd revealed themselves, their pattern of slander campaigns, of turning African people, you know, like Emmett Till, this is the way they were able to justify and kind of turn their look the other way, so to speak, at the brutal murder of Emmett Till, who supposedly whistled at a white woman, right, in a convenience store. But they could, white people, white America could almost look the other way because African men, even young African men like Emmett Till, had been so vilified by white people in this country. You might have heard Bill Burr, a comedian, just do this brilliant monologue on Saturday Night Live where he talked about how white women, out of respect for white men, like this piece just said, they created Brass Coupe as a monster to save themselves. White women, Bill Burr said, out of respect for white men, would, when they got caught with African men, would claim that it was non-consensual. And so this is no new thing. All the time, African people in this country, especially those of us who resist, are met with slander by the colonizer, met with counterintelligence programs by the colonizer. And such was the case with our brother Fred Hampton, who was murdered on December 4th, 1969. Before we end the Life Malcolm show, we're going to talk about Fred just a little bit. But to give you a little bit more than we will now, but just to give you a heads up, man, Fred Hampton was a charismatic, energetic, intelligent, beautiful African, strong, courageous, and fearless in the face of the most brutal kind of counterintelligence African people saw in the 20th century. So he was in Chicago. As a matter of fact, he's responsible for this organization many of us have heard of called the Rainbow Coalition. A lot of people associate that with another African who sure as hell wasn't no Fred Hampton. But this was Fred Hampton's creation. It was Chairman Fred Hampton who, at a very young age, in his 19, 20 years old, right, at a very young age, who was able to pull together some of the hardest, toughest so-called gang organizations in the city and bring them together in an effort to overturn the colonial conditions in the city instead of fighting against each other. And so we'll talk a little bit more about Fred Hampton on the second part of They Ain't Teach Us, and then we'll get a word from the word. But that's when we come back to the Life Malcolm show. Stay tuned.
injured, you deserve help from an attorney that knows how to handle your injury claim. This is Attorney Clinton Parrish from the Law Office of Clinton Parrish. For over a decade, I worked for insurance companies, and now I use that knowledge and experience to help people that have been injured. For a free consultation, call me, Attorney Clinton Parrish, at 813-413-7924. That's 813-413-7924, or at parishlawoffice.com. At the Law Office of Clinton Parrish, we take the pain out of being hurt. Offices, Riverview.
In Touch Radio, where you can listen to a cruising flow of smooth soul and jazz, today's R&B, a fun touch of hip-hop and gospel.
All my music on one station.
Giving you a buffet of music, news, and entertainment. We're In Touch Radio.
By now, we're all aware of the dangers of COVID-19. Like others with existing health issues, cancer patients are at a high risk due to their compromised condition. If you are newly diagnosed with cancer, your care likely can't wait. Moffitt Cancer Center is the best place for your cancer concerns and to provide guidance to help you plan your next steps. We're here for you. Call 1-888-456-2839 or go to moffitt.org/here-for-you.
Welcome back to the Life Malcolm Show. If you tuned in, you should know we've been talking about what they ain't teach us. And you can call in at 813-444-9588. Let me know if you agree. Some of y'all might know who Brass Coupe was. And I'd be impressed to learn where you found out. And so, yeah, call in, share what you know, if you will. Or just call in to kick it, 813-444-9588. But back to Chairman Fred. Chairman Fred Hampton, emerged, came to prominence as the chairman of the Black Panther Party in Chicago. And, like I said, was just a charismatic African worker. And so got in the street. The population was something like 27,000, I guess, in the community, and was able to organize hundreds of these African people and win them to the idea of self-reliance, independence, revolution, class struggle, etc. Chairman Fred would hold these political education classes 6 o'clock in the morning, was instrumental in bringing about a food program to his community. Just a tremendous type of leader and organizer. And again, remember, he was just 19, 20 years old. He was only 21 when the Chicago Police Department and the FBI shot him dead in his home next to his pregnant fiancee, Deborah Johnson, who was 9 months pregnant with who would later be born Alfred Johnson, and now be known to us as Fred Hampton Jr. And so Chairman Fred was a target for the FBI. And so when I say COINTELPRO, to make sure that we all on the same page, not trying to hide the ball, right? COINTELPRO, Counterintelligence Program. Counterintelligence Program. This is the program that came from your boy, the head of the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover, the same guy who cut his teeth, who made his bones, attacking the Garvey movement. It was J. Edgar Hoover. That's how he got pulled into the bureau. Then I think it was called. It wasn't even called the FBI. It was like the GBI, something like that. And so Hoover, even before the FBI became the FBI, and he was put in place to run it, was set up for that job by attacking African revolution, African independence in the form of attacking the Marcus Garvey movement. And so this is this guy who years later, right, 40-something, almost 50 years later, says that the Black Panther Party identifies the Black Panther Party as the largest threat to homeland, to national security. in the United States of America. These organizers, these African working class organizers who identified class struggle, identified the national struggle between colonized and colonizer, and put the political work on the ground, organize people and put them in motion for a revolutionary struggle. And Fred Hampton was caught up in this in this COINTEL, this counterintelligence program. And so on December 3rd, right, the FBI got this snitch, this agent, William O'Neill, I believe his name was William O'Neill, and got him to put some drugs in Fred's in something that Fred drank. And so Chairman Fred drank this stuff and became drowsy. I believe the story goes that he fell asleep while even on the phone with his mother. And after having been drugged and knocked out because of the drugs, here come the Chicago police and the FBI attacked the Black Panther Party home, the Black Panther Party house where Fred was, shot another Panther named Mark Clark, and proceeded to rush into the room where Chairman Fred was. To hear Deborah Johnson recall the story, she said bullets were just bouncing off the bed was just jumping, and so of course they shoot Fred, they pull him out of the bed, and there's some discussion about whether he's dead, and some cop fires 2 shots and says, bang, bang, he's good and dead now. And it was with this assassination of Chairman Fred, we see the serious resistance known as the Black Revolution of the 60s come to a close. And what we see now, our lack of leadership in the African working class community, our lack of political education, our lack of identity, all of these consequences, all of these conditions are consequences of the military attack on our struggle for freedom and independence. And so, a word from the Word. I believe it's in 2 Timothy, something like that. Somebody can help me find it. 2 Timothy, maybe 2:15. Let's go with that. But somewhere around there, it says, study to show thyself approved a workman. Let me see, who is that Tyler Perry say? 2 Timothy 2:15. Testing my Bible Baptist knowledge. Something like that. Oh, yep, bam. Hit it on the head. Study to show thyself approved unto God, a workman that needeth not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. Study. And so, again, there's this quote that you'll probably hear over and over again on the Life Malcolm show that says, of all our studies, history is best qualified to reward our research. And so when we look at the word, I remember when I learned this Bible verse at New Mount Zion Missionary Baptist Church, likely in Sunday school or BTU, which stood for Baptist Training Union, or both. Either Sunday School, Baptist Training Union, aka BTU, or both. I learned this scripture, and of course, we use that a lot at the house when mother didn't find your conversation up to par. You know, you get that first line in the verse, study. You know, we're talking about biblical stuff. If you come home and you didn't have your Sunday school lesson right or your BTU presentation together, you know, you know how it is. The same stuff you got at school, you get at home. Well, it was like that for me at church. The same talking, whatever else you got at the church, you get that at home too. So study to show thyself approved. Always heard it. But in my mind, I only connected it to the Bible. And so I would oftentimes find myself in a mess when all of the answers I sought about the world I could not find in the Bible. And so I'm thinking, oh man, I got to just study harder, because at this point in time in my life, I was still under the belief that there's some things that, we're not supposed to know, that the Lord works in mysterious ways. And by the way, if you want to call, you only have like 5 minutes left to talk. 813-444-9588. Love to hear from you. But, so call. And what was I say? Oh, the Lord works in mysterious ways, and no man knoweth the mind of God. And some even say don't question God, right? So I had all this kind of immature, this immature perception of reality and spirituality going on when I'm coming up short for answers to questions I had and did not find it in the Bible. I'm thinking it's my fault. Some lack of intelligence or spiritual worthiness on my part that precludes me from gleaning from this Bible what I need to know. And it wasn't until relatively recently, meaning like, I guess within the past 10, 15 years, that it just hit me like a ton of books. Not a ton of bricks, but it hit me like a ton of books. That this verse, when it says study, doesn't mean just study Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth, First and Second Samuel, First and Second Kings, Chronicles, Ezra, Nehemiah. Not just those. It means study. All you can. Study. Study history so that you know who you are, so that you know your position, your station in life, your responsibilities. Study nutrition so that you know how to take care of your body, so that you know whether you need to mask up or not, so that you know whether you need to take this vaccine. It's hard for me to even call it that, but this stuff that they say they want to give you because of this colonial virus. Tell them to give you Tell them to give you the stuff that you need to end colonialism, and you'll take care of the coronavirus yourself. How about that? See if they'll give you that, right? Those of us who are smart enough to know that colonialism is the problem, we looking for that colonialism medicine, and it's called revolution, in case you didn't know. But yeah, if you study nutrition, so you know what you got to do for your body to make yourself healthy and not be skewed and confused by whatever these people are saying in mainstream ruling class media. Study science. Study science, so you'll know the difference between what is good food and what is not good food, despite what anybody says. Study mathematics so you can calculate whether your building is square when you get ready to put a storage shed in the backyard and you don't have no help out there to pull the tape measure one way. You got to use math, because none of your friends will answer the phone when you call them to do this project in your backyard. Study mathematics, right? Study to show thyself approved, a workman that needed not to be ashamed, so you can step up to the plate, bop up to the chalkboard, the whiteboard, the Zoom meeting with confidence, and say what you got to say. A workman approved, that needeth not be ashamed. And that brings us to our closing quote for the day. We like to close with quotes here on the Life Malcolm Show. But before we do, let's review, right? My man Bill Holmes reminded me how important it is to never become a victim of that petty bourgeois mentality to bite my tongue when we ought to teach. And they ain't teach us, the first they ain't teach us lesson was about brass coupe and resistance. Then we talked a little bit about Fred Hampton Sr., we'll call him, because of the historic day of his assassination forthcoming on December 4th this week. And we brought that all together, tied it up in a nice little biblical bundle with study to show thyself approved, a workman that needeth not unto God, a workman that needeth not to be ashamed. And I'll close it with this quote: no investigation, no right to speak. Got it? No investigation, no right to speak. We're going to talk about it next week on the Life Malcolm Show. We'll start right there. You look up who said it, and we'll talk about it. See if, I don't like giving y'all all the answers all the time. But next week, though, we're going to chop it up. All right, then. This is the Life Malcolm Show. No phone calls this week. It's all right. Hope y'all leave some comments. I'm looking forward to hearing from you. To be continued.